The mythi was still warm. That detail would matter later, to Priya, to the reporters, to the woman in the back corner who'd been crying quietly into her chai and didn't realize who had just walked through the door. But, in that first moment, at 11:14 on a grey Tuesday morning in Leicester, none of that had happened yet. It was just a sweet shop. Doing what sweet shops do. Priya Sharma had owned Ronnie's for 11 years. Named it after her mother, who had named herself after a queen, which felt either deeply poetic or embarrassingly on the nose depending on who you asked. The shop sat on Belgrave Road, the Golden Mile, they called it, that half-mile stretch of South Asian restaurants and jewelers and fabric shops that smelled like cardamom and history every single time the wind blew wrong. Ronnie's was not the biggest shop on the road. It was not the most Instagrammable. It did not have a neon sign or a trendy rebrand or a TikTok account run by someone's nephew. What it had was Priya's mother's recipe for gulab jamun, which had survived a partition, 3 generations, and 2 kitchen fires. That was enough. Tuesday mornings were Priya's favorite kind of slow. She'd be up at 5 to start the koya, the reduced milk that formed the base of half the shop's bestsellers, stirring it in the big copper pot her mother had shipped from Amritsar in 1987, the one that had a dent on the left side from when Priya's brother Ajay had dropped it at age 7 and their mother had said nothing, just looked at him with a particular expression that required no words in any language. The koya would take 2 hours. Then, the frying. Then, the syrup. By the time the shop opened at 9, the whole street smelled like something that made people slow down. She'd done it so many times it had become a kind of meditation. Hands stirring. Mind quiet. Ajay said she should automate it. Get one of those big commercial vats. She had explained, with the patience of a woman who had explained this before, that some things were not supposed to be efficient. The morning had been ordinary in every measurable way. Mrs. Patel from 2 doors down had come in at 9:30 for her usual a-quarter kilo of barfi, which she claimed were for her grandchildren and which Priya knew were entirely for herself, because the grandchildren had mentioned being lactose intolerant and Mrs. Patel had waved that information away like a mildly irritating fly. A group of university students came in at 10, 3 of them in matching hoodies, one of them holding a half-eaten sausage roll from the bakery across the road, which Priya found mildly offensive but said nothing about. They bought an assortment of things they couldn't name but pointed at enthusiastically, which she found charming. Her Saturday girl Deepa wasn't in on Tuesdays, so it was just Priya and her part-time helper Rishi, who was 17, deeply earnest, and had once greeted a customer with "Welcome to Ronnie's, we hope you're hungry, we sure are," and looked genuinely puzzled when Priya asked him not to do that. By 11, the morning rush, such as it was, had thinned. Priya was restocking the front display. Lining up the kaju katli in their neat diagonal rows, the way her mother had always done it, each diamond-shaped piece of cashew fudge pressed with a thin layer of edible silver that caught the light and made the whole tray look like something worth dressing up for. She was thinking about whether she needed to call the supplier about the saffron order. She was also thinking, in a vaguer way, about the fact that her boiler had been making a sound for 3 days that she could only describe as resentful. She was not thinking about anything royal. The door opened. She didn't look up immediately. That was the thing she'd mention later, in every retelling, she didn't look up, because why would she? Doors opened all day, it was a shop. She heard the little brass bell she'd hung above the frame, her mother's idea, originally, so the shop knows it has a guest, she'd said, which Priya had found eccentric and, then, found she could not remove. She heard footsteps, soft on the tiled floor. She heard a voice, low, warm, slightly uncertain in the way people got when they walked into somewhere unfamiliar but wanted to seem like they weren't, saying, "Oh, it smells incredible in here." Priya looked up. There were 2 women. One of them she would later learn was a protection officer, positioned near the door with the specific stillness of someone whose job was to notice everything while appearing to notice nothing. But that was later. In the moment, Priya registered her only as a tall woman in a dark coat looking mildly alert. The other woman was looking at the kaju katli. She had brown hair, pulled back simply. A navy coat, well cut. No jewelry that Priya could immediately see except for small earrings. She was standing in the way people stand when they're genuinely interested in something, weight slightly forward, head tilted, not performing interest but actually inside it. She looked up and smiled. It was a very direct smile. The kind that arrived without preamble. "Sorry," she said. The smell when I walked in." "What is that?" "Koya," Priya said. "Reduced milk. We use it in most of the sweets. I started it at 5 this morning." 5 in the morning. The woman said it like she was genuinely recalibrating something. "For the shop opening at 9. Right." A pause. "That's dedication." "It's tradition," Priya said. "Different thing." The woman smiled again. Smaller this time, like she'd caught something. It was Rishi who recognized her. He came through from the back carrying a tray of fresh rasmalai, saw the woman standing at the counter, stopped completely, and made a sound that was not quite a word in any language. The rasmalai tilted. Priya grabbed the tray from his hands with the reflexes of someone who had been saving things from Rishi for 8 months. "Careful," she said, not looking at him. He started. "Tray," she said. He put the tray down. Then, he looked at the woman. Then, at Priya. His face was doing something she had never seen it do, which was attempting to contain an enormous amount of information. "Rishi," Priya said. "Why don't you check on the syrup?" He went. Slowly. Looking back twice. Priya turned to the woman, who was watching this exchange with an expression that was amusement, yes, but also something softer underneath. Something that looked, strangely, like relief. "He knows who you are," Priya said. "Most people do," she said. Not unkindly. "It's a strange thing to get used to. I imagine." A beat. "I'm Catherine," the woman said. And there it was. Priya would describe this moment differently in each retelling, depending on who she was telling it to. To her sister Meena, she said, "I just nodded, like a normal person, because what else do you do?" To Mrs. Patel, she said, "My heart was going absolutely mental, but I kept my face very calm." To the journalist from the Leicester Mercury who called 3 days later, I said hello and asked how I could help her, which I think is the only sensible response to any customer. All 3 versions were true. What she did not mention in any version was the brief, surreal moment where her brain offered her the following thought: Mom would have absolutely lost her mind. Her mother, who had named the shop after herself because she believed in the importance of permanence. Her mother, who had kept a framed photograph of the Queen on the wall of their family kitchen until Priya was 12 and asked about it, and her mother had said, simply, "Respect is not the same as agreement." Her mother, who had died 4 years ago and left Priya the copper pot and the recipes and the particular weight of continuing something. Priya looked at the woman standing in her shop. She asked how she could help. "I'm in Leicester for the afternoon," Catherine said, moving along the display case with the unhurried focus of someone who had cleared real time for this. "I wanted to honestly, I've driven past this road so many times over the years and I've always meant to stop. My children have been asking me about Indian sweets. George tried gulab jamun at a friend's birthday and apparently talked about it for a week." "How old is he?" 11. A pause. "He described it as like a donut but from another dimension." Priya laughed. She couldn't help it. "That's actually not wrong," she said. "I thought so too." Catherine leaned forward slightly, looking at the tray of gulab jamun, dark, glossy, sitting in their shallow pool of rose syrup. "Can you tell me about them? I want to be able to explain properly." "He'll ask questions. He always asks questions." So Priya told her. She told her about the koya base and how the heat changed the milk proteins, how the balls had to be fried slow or they'd brown on the outside while staying raw in the middle, how the syrup was cardamom and rose water and sugar at a very specific ratio that Priya's mother had refused to write down and that Priya had spent 2 years recreating from memory and instinct after she died. She told her how the name meant rose waterberry in Persian, how the sweet had traveled across centuries and cultures before landing in a display case on Belgrave Road, Leicester, on a grey Tuesday morning with a brass bell above the door. Catherine listened to all of it. Not politely. "Actually. Your mother's recipe," she said, when Priya finished. "Yes." A small silence. It's still her shop, really, Catherine said. It was such a precise thing to say that Priya had to look away for a moment, toward the window, where the Belgrave Road traffic moved in its ordinary Tuesday morning way, and gather herself. Yes, she said. It is. By the time Rishi came back from checking the syrup, which had required exactly 45 seconds of attention and the remaining 7 minutes of his absence were unaccounted for, the conversation had moved to Jalabai. This was Priya's doing. Jalabai was her test suite. She had decided this unconsciously years ago and only articulated it recently. If someone walked into the shop and went straight for the Jalabai, they either knew exactly what they were doing or they'd been raised right. It was the most demanding sweet she sold, spiraled, fried, soaked in saffron syrup, eaten hot if possible, a texture that was simultaneously crisp and saturated and slightly insane. There was no neutrality with Jalabai. You either understood it or you looked at it with polite uncertainty and ordered barfi instead. Catherine had looked at it with interest. It's very orange, she said. Food coloring. Traditional. Some people skip it, but then, it's just pale and it looks wrong. The color is part of the experience. Like the silver on the Kaji Katli. Exactly like that. Edible silver. Catherine said it the way people said things they found genuinely extraordinary but were trying not to make a fuss about. We eat silver. Vark. Been around longer than most countries. And it tastes like nothing, really. It's textural. It makes the whole thing feel ceremonial. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then, that's rather beautiful. My brother thinks it's pretentious. Your brother is wrong. Priya decided she liked her. The shop had 3 other customers during this time. 2 of them, a young couple Priya didn't recognize, probably students. The girl with a large tote bag covered in embroidered flowers came in, clocked the woman at the counter, made eye contact with each other, and then behaved with the specific highly controlled casualness of people trying very hard to behave normally. They looked at the display for a long time. They bought a box of mixed sweets. They left without speaking above a murmur. The 3rd customer was Mr. Okonkwo from the hardware shop 4 doors down, who came in every Tuesday for a bag of fennel seeds that he chewed throughout the afternoon and who was not a man who paid much attention to celebrities or current events and who greeted Priya as usual, accepted his fennel seeds, nodded at the woman in the navy coat with ordinary neighborly politeness, and left. Priya felt a strange fondness for Mr. Okonkwo in that moment. Rishi returned. Positioned himself at the far end of the counter with the fixed expression of someone who had decided to be professional and was finding this extremely taxing. This is Rishi, Priya said. He helps me on weekday mornings. Hi, said Rishi. Hello, said Catherine. Rishi began. Then, stopped. Then, started again. I watch my mum watches, we think it's really Rishi, Priya said. He closed his mouth. Sorry, he said. I'm fine. I'm completely fine. You're doing great, Catherine said, and it was so genuinely kind and so calmly delivered that Rishi's composure crumbled entirely and he nodded several times very fast like a bobblehead on a dashboard and then found something urgent to do with a cloth near the cash register. Priya said nothing. There was nothing to say. They worked through the display case methodically. Priya had not planned for this, had not planned for any of it, but she found herself falling into the rhythms of it naturally, the way she did when she had a customer who was genuinely curious rather than just browsing. She described each sweet as she described them 10,000 times, but also not exactly like that, because this particular customer asked different questions. Precise ones. Technical in unexpected places. What makes the barfi set? Is it just cooling? Cooling and the fat content of the koya. The milk solids solidify as they cool. Temperature control during the cooking stage matters enormously. Too high and it granulates, too low and it never firms properly. So it's essentially a confectionery chemistry problem. My mother called it patience. Probably the same thing. At some point Priya offered tea. She did this without overthinking it, The way she offered tea to anyone who stayed long enough, it was just what her mother had done and, therefore, what she did, a hospitality reflex as automatic as breathing. She'd half expected the protection officer near the door to intervene somehow, but the woman just shifted her weight slightly and said nothing. Catherine said yes. Rishi made the chai with the focused intensity of someone defusing something. He brought 2 cups. Set them down carefully. Retreated. He's sweet, Catherine said quietly. He's terrified of you, Priya said. I know. A beat. I don't love that part. He'll tell his grandchildren about this. God. She wrapped her hands around the cup. I suppose he will. The chai settled something between them. That specific thing that hot drinks do in awkward or significant moments, they create a task, something to hold, a reason to pause without the pause feeling empty. Priya had noticed this her whole life and never quite had language for it until a therapist she'd seen briefly after her mother died had called it transitional object use in social rituals, and Priya had thought, or just tea. My youngest, Catherine said, looking down into the cup, Charlotte, she's going through a phase where she's very interested in where things come from. Not just food. Everything. She asked William last week where bricks were from and he gave her a genuinely detailed answer about clay and kiln temperatures and she just stared at him for a long time and then said, but who invented it, and he had to admit he wasn't sure. Priya smiled. How old is Charlotte? 9. Something crossed her face, affection so unguarded it looked almost startled, like it had arrived before she could arrange it. She has opinions. Very established opinions. She will come in here one day, I think, and want to know everything. Send her. I'll teach her to make gulab jamun. Catherine looked up. I mean that, Priya said. I know you do. A pause. Thank you. There was a moment, it lasted maybe 4 seconds, maybe less, where the conversation stopped and both women were just sitting with their tea and the smell of cardamom and the particular grey Leicester light coming through the front window, and Priya thought, this is a person carrying a significant amount of weight. Not in a dramatic way. Not visibly. But, in the way Priya's mother had carried weight, in the set of the shoulders, in the quality of stillness, in the very particular look of someone who had learned to rest inside very small moments because small moments were what they got. Priya recognized it because she had felt it herself, in the years after her mother died, running a shop built from her mother's hands, carrying recipes that lived only in memory now. The weight of continuation. The weight of being looked at. The weight of a public face worn over a private one for so many years you sometimes forgot, briefly, where one ended. She didn't say any of this. She refilled the chai. Then, Catherine said, I'd like to buy something for the children. A selection, but I want to be able to explain each one. I want to know the story of what I'm bringing home. So they went through it again. This time with intention. Gulab jamun for George, from another dimension, Priya said, and Catherine laughed with her whole face. Kaju Katli for Charlotte, because of the silver, because of the ceremony of it, because a child who wanted to know where bricks came from would want to know about cashews and silver foil and the trade routes that had moved both across continents. Rasgulla for Louis, the youngest, lighter, more delicate, soft white balls in clear syrup. It's very gentle, Priya said. Less aggressive than jalebi, less rich than the koya-based sweets. It's a good entry point for younger children. He has a lot of energy, Catherine said carefully. The rasgulla will not excite him further, Priya said. I can almost guarantee it. Sold. She added a selection of namkeen too savory, because children needed the contrast, because sometimes sweet needs the interruption of salt to make sense. And the jalebi? Priya asked. Catherine looked at the jalebi. Spiraled and orange and glistening. Those are for me, she said. While Priya packaged everything, the pale pink boxes Ronnie's used, tied with a thin gold cord, her mother's idea, because presentation was respect, presentation was saying this thing is worth caring about, she heard Catherine moving slowly along the wall display. The wall had photographs. Not many. A few old ones of the original Ronnie's, her mother behind the counter in the 90s, the colors slightly saturated the way photos went when they aged. A picture of Belgrave Road during Diwali, orange light everywhere, people pressed together on the pavement. A black and white one of her grandparents in Amritsar that her mother had framed in silver. She heard Catherine stop. "Is this your mother?" Priya looked up from the ribbon. Yes. Catherine was looking at the photograph from the 90s. Her mother, 20 years younger, standing behind this same counter, same copper pot visible in the background through the kitchen hatch. She had a very straight posture, Priya's mother. And an expression that managed to be both warm and entirely composed at once. "She looks like someone who doesn't tolerate nonsense," Catherine said. "The kindest possible description of her, yes. I mean it as the highest compliment." "I know," Priya said. "She'd have liked you for saying it." She was in the shop for 43 minutes. Priya knew this because she checked the clock when the brass bell rang on the way out, the way she always did when she was alone for a moment after someone left, just a habit, marking the shape of time. 11:14 to 11:57. The grey morning still outside, the Belgrave Road traffic still moving, Mrs. Patel from 2 doors down standing on the pavement with her small-wheeled shopping cart, looking at the sleek dark car with the expression of a woman doing significant arithmetic. The door closed. Rishi made a sound like air leaving a balloon. "Rishi," Priya said. "I know," he said. "I know. I'm being professional. I am being so professional right now. You can stop being professional." He sat down on the stool behind the counter and put his face in his hands. Not distressed. Something more like pressure released. "My mom is going to," he started. "Yes. She's going to, I know. I can't even go text her," Priya said. "Take 5 minutes." He looked up. "Really? Go." He went, phone already in hand, already typing, and she could hear him in the back saying, Mom, you're not going to, Mom, listen," and she turned to face the front of the shop, which was as it always was, the display case and the brass bell and the photograph on the wall, and she stood in it for a moment. She thought about her mother. This happened at irregular intervals and, with no reliable trigger, Priya had stopped trying to predict or manage it. This particular thing grief did, which was arrive sideways. She could go 3 weeks without it and, then, it would come at her from a direction she hadn't been watching, the smell of a specific frying temperature, a song, the particular angle of afternoon light, and, now this. Now a woman with warm eyes and 3 children and the very precise phrase, "It's still her shop, really." 4 years since the funeral. 4 years of running Ronnie's the way it had always been run because there was no other way she could imagine running it, which had started as grief and had slowly, quietly, become its own thing. Not less heavy. Just differently distributed. She straightened the Kaju Katli tray. Each piece in its diagonal row. The edible silver catching the light. Her mother's hands had done this 10,000 times before hers. Belgrave Road was not a quiet road. By noon it would be properly loud, the lunch rush beginning, the sweet smell from Ronnie's competing with the tandoor smoke from the restaurant 3 doors down, the occasional honk, the schoolkids who cut through on their way somewhere else, the sound of a city being itself. Priya had stood behind this counter through all of it for 11 years and she found she did not want it quiet. Quiet felt wrong for this street. This street had been built on the noise of people who had come from somewhere far away and made something here, not instead of what they'd left but, alongside it, a second language of spice and color and brass bells above doorways. Her mother had understood this instinctively. She had put the framed photograph of the Queen on the kitchen wall, not because she was sentimental about the crown, but because she believed that presence in a country meant participating in it, holding it alongside what you'd brought with you, not replacing one with the other. Priya had spent years thinking about what that wall meant. She thought she understood it now. Rishi came back. His eyes were red in the way of a young man who would deny they were red under all available questioning. "She cried," he said. "My mum. On the phone. While I was telling her. That sounds right. She wants to know if you got a photo." Priya looked at him. "I didn't think to," she started. I know, I didn't either, I was trying to be professional." "You were professional." He was quiet for a moment. Then, I don't think I need a photo. I think I've got it. He tapped the side of his head. Up here. Priya thought, 17 years old and already understanding that some things don't need evidence. Good, she said. So do I. The Mercury called on Thursday. Someone had talked the couple with the embroidered tote bag, probably, or possibly Mrs. Patel, who had been standing outside and would not have been able to help herself. The journalist was young and enthusiastic and wanted details, wanted the moment you realized, wanted what did she say, what did you say? Priya was careful. She said, she came in and she was genuinely curious and she spent real time with us and she knew the right questions to ask. She said, she bought sweets for her children and she wanted to know the stories behind them. She said, she saw the photograph of my mother and she said something very kind. She did not say what the something very kind was. That was for herself. That was the 43 minutes. The journalist asked if it had felt surreal. No, Priya said, and meant it. It felt like a good customer who paid attention. A beat on the line. That's it, the journalist said. That's the best thing anyone can be in this shop, Priya said. The following Saturday Deepa came in for her usual shift, read the Mercury article on her phone behind the counter, and looked up at Priya with enormous eyes. Why didn't you ring me, she said. You weren't working that day. I could have come in. Deepa, I could have been here. You would have done exactly what Rishi did. Deepa considered this. What did Rishi do? Lost the ability to form sentences. Yeah, okay. Fair. The pink boxes moved fast that week. People came in who had read the article, people who hadn't and were just passing, people who'd been meaning to come for years and, finally, had a reason to stop hesitating. Priya served all of them the same way, the same explanations, the same care with the Kaju Katli rose, the same offer of chai to anyone who stayed long enough. She told the story of the gulab jamun to a man from Coventry who'd never had one before and watched his face change on the first bite. Like a donut, he said, but, there's something else in there. Rose water, Priya said. And cardamom. And the syrup is, no, don't tell me yet. He held up a hand. Let me figure it out. She waited. He ate. He thought. Something floral, he said. But, not sweet floral. Something older than that. Rose, she said. Persian, originally. Traveled here via mobile kitchens, trade routes, partition, a woman from Amritsar who brought her copper pot on a plane in 1987. He looked at the half-eaten gulab jamun in his hand. All of that's in here? All of it, she said. Every single time. 3 weeks later, a handwritten note arrived. Not on official paper. Not a palace letterhead or an embossed crest. Just cream card, the kind you bought from a stationery shop, with a small border of very simply drawn flowers that looked like they might have been done by a child. The handwriting was clear and unhurried. It said, George ate the gulab jamun on the way home in the car and declared them perfect with the authority of someone who has made peace with a very important question. Charlotte has requested that the silver on the Kaju Katli is explained to her fully before she eats anymore, which I was able to do because of you. Louis fell asleep before the Rasgulla was opened, which we have taken as a sign of their power. Thank you for the tea. Thank you for the 43 minutes. Thank you for telling me about your mother. The shop is lucky to have you. She would be proud. Priya read it twice standing at the counter. Then, she folded it carefully. She opened the drawer beneath the register, the drawer where she kept things that mattered, receipts from her first month of trading, a note from a school group that had visited 6 years ago, a pressed marigold from her mother's funeral garland. She put the card inside. Closed the drawer. She went back to the Kaju Katli. Each piece in its diagonal row. Silver catching light. That evening, after closing, she stood in the kitchen with the copper pot on the stove, starting the koya early. There'd been a run on the gulab jamun that weekend, she wanted to be ahead of it, and, she thought, for no reason she could have explained to anyone, that her mother would have found the whole thing extremely funny. Not the royal part. Not the article in the Mercury. Not the pink boxes and the handwritten note and Rishi's mother crying on the phone. The copper pot part. The fact that a woman had walked into the shop for the smell alone, followed it in from the street like a thread, and that the smell had been the koya, and the koya was started at 5 in the morning, and it was started at 5 in the morning because her mother had done it that way, and her mother had done it that way because her mother before her had done it that way, and somewhere in that chain of 5 a.m. mornings was a woman in Amritsar standing at a stove that no longer existed in a country that had been drawn and redrawn around her, and the smell had survived all of it. Had crossed oceans. Had arrived here on a grey Tuesday in November, and pulled someone through a doorway. Her mother would have said, "That's what food is for." She would have been right. She was always right. The koya simmered, and the shop settled into its evening quiet, and Priya stirred, and the smell of warm milk and cardamom drifted out through the gap under the door, onto Belgrave Road, into the cold air, into the city, carrying itself forward. For 43 minutes on a Tuesday in November, a shop on the Golden Mile was just a shop, and a woman was just a woman, and the sweets were exactly what they had always been. Which was everything.